developing multiple hypotheses at the same time allows us to be much faster to find the optimal solution by eliminating a larger search space. So if that's our hypothesis, here's our first experiment. We brought in the Lean Startup Machine. I love the Lean Startup Machine. I mentor there very frequently. I have 2 minutes left, Sarge. I'm almost there. So we brought them in for a 2-day session, the entire company, all of our engineers, product owners, everybody. We brought them down to DC. We did the Lean Startup Machine with them. And based on that, we now run inside of TLC Labs and inside of TLC Labs, which is every 2 weeks we run a Lean Startup Machine, which means anybody in the company can pitch any idea in any industry they want, and we will fund it and help them explore whether or not they can actually build a business out of it. The first round of this has just finished, and we're building a golfing application, which is kind of cool, having nothing to do with libraries. Volunteers who have gone to Lean Startup Machine act as mentors. Anyone can pitch. Everyone in the organization can go to the pitch meetings, and anyone can vote on which things they think will work. Anyone can join validated teams, and anyone can join MVP teams. And we have 2 winners of our first class. So that's been an interesting experiment. The second experiment, this was run purely Lean Startup style. This is an actual real product. It went from an idea to an MVP in 2 weeks. They weren't allowed to build any software until they had 5 customers. They concierged the first 5 to 10 customers. They wrote all the product. The product was data that they delivered. They actually created the data by hand and delivered it by hand to make sure that they were doing it the right way and the right fields were in the right place. So they actually had to talk to customers and understand what they were doing before they were allowed to write the software. It generated $2,000 in its first week. It's added 10 customers a week while adjusting the code and testing the market. The average customer is worth $6,000 in annual revenue. There are now 80 customers. It's been doubling in revenue every month since it launched. This will be one of the most widely, quickly adopted pieces of library software that we've ever launched.
Next Instagram.
It's maybe not that, but for us it's great. The total addressable libraries are 11,000 addressable libraries. This is a product that we built with basically an idea person and 2 engineers in less than a month. And it's going to be worth $1 million a year for the foreseeable future. So,
since the Lean Startup Machine events, I'm looking for more ways to experiment with my technical assumptions. Instead of spending weeks creating code to test a process, I'll spend a few hours testing the riskiest parts. Anything I think I can make fail quick. Once all the assumptions are tested, I'll move on to a more robust version. Another change is creating the first versions of output manually and handing it off to the customer for feedback. This is done before writing a single line of code. Being a developer, it's tough to spend time creating output in a text editor and passing it off with system generated. It usually takes a few iterations before the customer is completely satisfied. This is when I actually code it knowing it's what a customer wants and that I've eliminated development waste.
So the traditional measurement of success was the previous story I told you about how we're going to make $1 million a year, but that was my version of success. That is how my engineers think about their products now and how they want to develop their products now. So Larry is my principal engineer. Larry is a self-identified extreme introvert. So I'm not outing him. He is in fact an introvert. He does not like talking to people. He's very uncomfortable about it. He is on the phone now live with customers almost every single day because he thinks it's so critical to his understanding of how to code correctly and what to create in order to not create waste. This is what success looks like when you create a learning organization where people want to understand how to validate and understand their ideas in the real world with real customers, not with imagined customers or their product owner who's going to tell them whether or not they did it right. These people want to see their product working in a real live system with real human beings. And that's what they value. So, Eric, I think, has it completely right, and it's also a very geeky joke. The only way to win is to learn faster than anyone else. It is what we believe at this point is true, and we think that it's going to become more and more true for more and more organizations and more industries. If you guys liked this talk, TLC Labs is putting a conference on with Modus Operandi, which is Jim Benson's organization, both in New York and DC. I would encourage you to come, and it's an open space, so we would have talks about as many of these things as you'd like.
When is it?
It's November in New York, DC. We have not set a date for yet. If you go to these websites, you will see.
Are you going to serve Ks and Blitzes?
Yes, Ks and Blitzes is exactly what we're going to serve. Are there questions?
First, thank you very much. And yeah, we'll take questions for a few minutes.
All right, Jabe, so you're barely older than the company.
Yes.
So
It was actually technically a year or two older than me.
whose permission did you have to get to pretty much gut the way how things weren't working in order to try something new?
So I think, as is likely in many situations, it's easier to solve these problems when somebody's in a lot of pain. Mrs. Murphy, the CEO of the company, has been running it for her whole life. She still owns it, privately owned. And she brought us in because she was really desperate to solve some of the underlying problems. What has been really encouraging is not the initial stabilization phase, which I think most people could achieve at some point, but that she's encouraged us to figure out how to become innovative again, because it's part of the culture of the company is to build on innovation. So trying to figure out how to de-ossify a company is different than stabilizing it. We could have done different things in order to just make it run smooth, and that's not what we did. So Mrs. Murphy is the person that I spend a lot of time talking to these ideas. It's interesting for people who might want to try this. We control the C-level. We control the entire company. It made this transition much faster than I think it could happen if we hadn't. I think I might be able to explain it to other C-levels executives and having experienced it and help transformations, but it would not be as easy.
How long did the transformation take?
I am of the personal belief that it takes a minimum of 2 years to do a true. If you know what you're doing, it takes a minimum of 2 years to do a true agile.
With full empowerment and all the knowledge,
Yes.
it'll take at least 2 years.
So literally the learning that I'm talking about, so Larry, the guy you saw there, who I love, used to come to my office every day and tell me, I don't want to figure out what to do. I want you to tell me what to do. I'm a professional. I can do it exactly. I'll do it perfectly, but I'm not going to decide what to do. That's your job. And I would say to him every day for 2 years, no. If you have a problem that you want to discuss and we can try to figure it out together, that's different. But exposing people to that level of ambiguity for 2 years, you literally need to rewire their brains. Like they just can't even begin to process what ambiguity is at first. So I think it's 2 years.
So these kind of like lean stand-up every 2-week meetings, have they grown in popularity with the workforce? Or they start out strong and now people a few core show up, or how's it generally
So
received?
there's a couple things. First, I didn't think anyone would show up, and second, I thought everyone would pick. So most of the average tenure of our employees is 15 years. So these are people who've been with the company. I didn't bring in a whole new workforce to make this happen, right? And I assumed that people who had been working in a library company for 15 years would all come and pitch me library ideas. They haven't. It's highly popular still, and the ideas are they're wild, they're crazy. Some of them are terrible. But some of them are really awesome, and it's been really interesting to empower people and allow them to kind of believe that they could do something interesting. I think you can see in that eBibliophile that it's not just impacting the idea that we could do other things, it's actually impacting our core as well. Like there's a massive amount of new innovation going on inside the library, partially because it used to be treated as a sacred cow that you couldn't play with. Like you just had to make sure it was fed well so that it kept on going. And now people are trying to figure out ways like, how can we actually experiment inside the library space? We know it really well. We have the right customers. How do we do that? And that's been interesting.
One thing I was wondering, do any of your folks go out into the libraries and talk with the folks just to see what pain points people are having?
Yes. So the strange things that happened to me is like I got called the other day, and this group called me and said, we want to talk to you. And I said, okay. And they were like, we are the committee for library patrons, which is a problem because the people we sell to are library boards and they don't know anything about patrons, right? So these guys had decided to make a private committee that without getting permission from anybody, there was like 6 of them, they'd organized it themselves, they'd gone out to libraries and talked, and they exactly what you're describing. So they were coming back to me to be like, how do we actually use any of this information now? How would we be disruptive in the marketplace? How would we leverage it? So that's been really interesting. And I get all these kind of strange groups of people coming up to me saying, we're the group that's doing this. I'm like, oh, great, interesting. They don't come and ask for permission anymore, which is kind of amazing.
You had that slide that said 11,000 library customers,
Yeah.
and for most people, right, isn't that beneath them? I mean, like it's not worth even looking, certainly at VCs. So, but clearly there's a need. Just because you have 11,000 customers doesn't mean that it's not worth doing.
Yeah.
So can you talk about that? About do you really have to cure cancer? Do you have to go try to cure cancer, or?
So, the library industry is a particularly interesting industry to me. 11,000 libraries, this is a very large industry. There's some significant VC funding going actually into the library space. The largest ILS provider is a VC play. It was bought up by investors. It's not a big market. It's not going to cure cancer, but we actually, the way I think about it, the way that I work with my staff to think about it, is that libraries are one of the most critical defenders of democracy in the United States. It's one of the last places you can go, and they will put a book of, Obama next to George Bush, and that's fine. It's the last place where you go, and part of the value system of it is to give you equal access to whatever information you want. And finally, it's one of the last places where if you can't afford a Kindle or a computer, that you can go and access information without paying for it. And that's it. People don't understand that 30% of the United States has no access to a computer at all. And then about 70% has access, but something like 30% of the 70% that do have access, they have access either at work or at home, and they have one computer with children. In other words, they don't have access to computers. So the level of disparity of information in the United States right now, the libraries provide a critical resource for these people. So what we're trying to do inside the TLC is really make sure that libraries can survive, because they need to be perceived in their community. The people who have the money need to see that it looks like something that they would be interested in. And for years, if you walked into a library, it didn't. Especially the computer software was overly utilitarian and people did not understand how to use it. So they weren't going to invest in it.
I'd like to understand a little bit more about how how decisions are made. I think I saw something up there about how everybody gets to vote.
Yeah.
I don't know if that means that everybody's vote counts the same,
Yeah.
and that, for example, did you say that there was a golf application being
Yeah.
looked at? Okay. So using that as an example, you know, maybe there are a bunch of golfers that happen to be among the voters, and
Yep.
so they voted that up. But in fact, if you were to go through various lean steps and actually, you know, you learn a lot about users, maybe develop some software, test that software, et cetera, you might not have yet found out whether or not the market makes sense from the standpoint that you don't have a sales force that, you know, can sell to golf people.
Yep.
You don't know the golf market. You don't know golfing channels. You're going to have to market to both the players and to the golf courses.
Yep.
And so the expenses start mounting,
Yep.
right? And yet, I mean, how does that process work? When does it stop? Or when does someone come in and say, look, the financials don't make sense?
So I think the
they
first thing
do.
I would say is that we have a tendency to not address problems that we have not yet had. So
Right.
those would be lovely problems to have on some level. The other one is this. The pitching process, this particular pitching process, is to identify people who have ideas that they are passionate enough about to stand up in front of their peers and say, I'd like to do this. And we think that that's an indication that there's enough intrinsic motivation on their part to actually follow through and do that work. And then second of all, the voting in that particular case, this voting is for this lean startup machine idea. We have a normal organization. We distribute decisions, but there are decisions that are made by the C-levels. They're like, it's not a democracy.
Right.
Okay. This is a democracy, and it's a democracy because what we're interested in is there enough motivation inside of the group to join them, to join the vision, right? So we don't believe that an individual can do it by themselves. We believe they need a co-founder and support. So that's the reason for the voting. Now, as far as what does it mean to develop an actual application, we make them go out and do standard lean startup. They have to prove that there's a market. They have to just the same way that you would do it. And we, at that point, vision ourselves as an incubator. Anybody who got to the point where they wanted to do mass market plays, we would probably bring in outside funding and spin them into a separate organization. For all the reasons you're describing. They would have to actually have, it can't be a hobby at that point. So right now, a lot of the lean startup innovation is two-pronged. One is we'd love to have somebody come up with a really interesting product, and that would be awesome. But more importantly, it's a way to diffuse the lean startup innovation throughout the organization and create a learning culture. And we believe that it just happens to be a more interesting game than anything else, if that makes sense. So it's a game that you could win in real life.
Yeah. I think it sounds like it creates a sense of fun and creativity.
Yes.
Even if you don't go forward with a number of the projects.
That's
for
right.
one reason or another.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Don't?
Benefit of time, I think let's move on.
Yes, thank you.